Do I have sound here? Can you hear me? Okay, let's check the. We are going to have tons of glitches, okay? This is how I concluded what I concluded at the at the last in the last half an hour or so, because this whole thing has been so nerve-wracking. Not only that I'm doing this first video appearance, I'm doing it live and I'm doing it with zero technical knowledge. My daughter has relatively slightly more knowledge. And to give you, this is a warm up, okay? Please stay with me. A little bit of a kind of an idea on how things are set up here, because this is not a studio I'm used to recording with professionals in a little studio that we had in Oregon. Real cameras. This is an iPhone, so we had to upgrade our iPhone, and we have two floor lamps here. And what we did was to cut a pillowcase, a silk pillowcase, and then drape it over so we wouldn't have so much glaring or harsh light. And with that, I don't even know what you're seeing, because now my iPad is glitching here. So it's a it's a very primitive setup with a very primitive microphone. It's one of these clip-ons. So I want to thank you in advance for patiently staying with me. If there are any glitches, we'll try to address. This is again the first video. It's the first live video ever. Now, welcome everyone. It's so good to be here with you. I suspect many of you here present this evening. It's 7 p.m. My time here in Florida, Eastern Standard Time. It's been a long time. It's been a long time, and I have been thinking nonstop since last night. In fact, it kept me up. I already have insomnia. I have been dealing with a major, major, major chronic insomnia issue, but this was an additional layer to my insomnia, because, when you're basically MIA in terms of your physical self, because in the last few months, I have been putting out some live podcasts for my Patreon community, a couple of those, I believe, on X, but these been, again, warm up sessions. And with that, this being the first, I kept thinking, what what this is the first, right, first session. What am I going to talk about? There's so much to talk about, and I would divide it to two macro categories, right? One would be the issues and the topics that I talked about for 20 years or so, related to the political and the geopolitical landscape, and current stuff, in addition to context, pretext, historical examples. Many of the issues we discussed during my Newsbud and before that Boiling Frogs Post years had to do with a more analytical approach, delving deeper into these topics that we work together. And I can say, and I'm sure those of you who've been with me for many, many years, 2 decades, I believe you can agree with me on this particular fact. And that fact being, it's always been nonpartisan, right? It's never been a party politics in our discussions, our analysis, our podcast episodes and videos, because when we delve so deep into any of those macro issues, we realize that these issues really in nature, they are not partisan. That's when we delved into deep state and Operation Gladio, and all that. Okay, so that's one that I was thinking about, and then a part of me felt kind of unusual to just jump in and start delving into those topics when I have been away for so long. And on the note where I left 4.5 years ago. So part of me wants to take this opportunity and tell you what happened since that last video. And before I forget, I want to thank all of you, and I know many of those people are not here today with us because it's through my other main YouTube channel, and I will explain why we are broadcasting through this side channel that I've had that has been inactive for, I don't know, 2 decades or so. I want to thank all of you with all your comments after that video throughout these 4.5 absent years, MIA years. I have read every single comment and I have greatly appreciated every single one of those. And every single one of those comments were so sincere and so sympathetic, empathetic, and real, okay, and wreathed with kindness. And I really want to thank you for that because when we made that video, in fact, when I made it, it was my late husband who was on the other side of the camera, right? We did it with camera, and a lot of thought went into that. I wanted to share the situation with all my subscribers, my community members, and the easiest way to do it, and that was the way we wanted to do at the beginning, and my husband, late husband, wanted to do it that way, was to write a very comprehensive, sincere, open letter and send it to all my subscribers and community members. But then, I don't know, something inside of me said, no, I just want to do it. It's so difficult to do, but I want to do it and I want to look people in the eye. I know it is looking into the camera lens, but it I just wanted to connect in person. Um, and with that, I decided that I was going to record that segment and explain the situation, having just received the final diagnosis on ALS, and let you know that I was going to homeschool my kid probably. This was during COVID, and take care of my husband. Many of you are already familiar with ALS, and that I was going to be absent for a while, probably a year, 2 or 3 years, right? So that's how I left it off. And a lot of other things happened. A lot of horrific things happened in addition to ALS and what it comes with it, all the things that come with this horrible terminal disease called ALS. And, those situations like Murphy's Law almost, and they say anything and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And those things, some of them brought us face to face with really looking the darkness, evil, the most horrific segment of maybe humanity or society that most of us, fortunately, don't get to see. Um, but I guess when you're down, really down in every aspect, and I will explain hopefully in like a 4 or 5 mini segments of what happened, because I don't want to get so much into details because a lot happened. You know how it is with when your body is weak and your immune system is vulnerable, right? That's when you catch everything. whether it's the flu or any kind of fungal diseases, because your immune system is that, right? Um, that's how it is with humanity and life. And I'm gonna take for 1 second, maybe it's better, and tell you that when we are vulnerable, really vulnerable, that's when we get to see and face and deal with things that ordinarily, when we are strong or we are going about with our lives and everything, we don't deal. Okay, just like uh, immune system shutting down or being weak. Okay, one example. We had never been totally defrauded, or conned. Sure, we had been ripped off in our lives. You bring in someone, they fix something, later you find out, oh my God, I paid, $125 extra. The guy ripped me off. Of course, we had situations like this, but we had never been in any situation where we had been defrauded, right? Conned. Well, that happens when you're down and when you're so vulnerable, because it's as if you are giving out this scent that says, that's why they talk about vulnerable adults, right? Elderly, they are the vulnerable category for people, the con artists, etc., who target them. It's as if you put out the scent, and all of a sudden, all those dark uh, trolls forces, they know, hey, there is a newcomer to this arena, therefore you get targeted, right? And that happened to us. That happened to us, and it put us in a very, very dire financial situation. And we always were proud of being, one of those very, very responsible families, the ones who always have saving. You won't put all your savings in one basket. You reserve stuff for retirement, those types of things, as per our ability. We had our investments. So we were blessed. We were fortunate. We were not, one of those categories of situations, or people when either you haven't thought about those things or you haven't had the ability, because you have been living, paycheck to paycheck with a lot of things happening, and not having the opportunity to look at the future as much as possible and set aside these types of preventive things. So those kinds of things happen when you're vulnerable. And even if you have been part of the fortunate segment to put, these measures in place to prevent these types of financial crises, oh my goodness, there are people from the dark side who are better than you. And when you're target and when you're vulnerable, you can get hit. And I will get into that topic maybe another time if there is time here, because part of it relates to Oregon. And Oregon actually prompted this live video because a lot of it relates to Oregon. Even though we were here in Florida, we were dying in Florida, we were dealing with ALS in Florida, our homestead, our house was still in the state of Oregon. And some of the other measures we had put in place, they were all in our homestead area in Bend, Oregon. Okay? So that's for one, that's the financial stuff. And then the second thing, when again, that applies to, I believe right now, to 90% of probably you who are here. I don't know how many people are here. By the way, at some point, I am going to take a pause. Probably I'm going to start humming, because that's what I usually do. I hum and go through some of the questions and comments. So I haven't forgotten anything on that front. It's just that I have never done live. I have never done live by myself. So thank you for being understanding. I will be looking at some of these questions. I'm going to say, okay, let's scroll here, and and okay, there's not much, unless I have even I don't even have an idea how it works because I know these chat sections and questions and comments will disappear later when the recorded version goes up. But I will check on that. Okay, I promise I will do that. Now, with that, I will go to the second category. The second category that I was saying, I believe most of you will have no clue that these issues exist because I didn't have any clue. My late husband didn't have a clue, and here he was much older than me in terms of our age difference. He had been in workforce for 45, 50 years. He was a COO and the CFO of a large company, and he had managed 5,000 people for 25 years of his almost 50 years of working, right? Um, but but if unless and if you're in that situation, I guess again, thanks to the absence of the topic and it's now surfacing, most people don't know about it. And I didn't know about it. We didn't know about it. And this whole issue, case of what now is again slowly in little bits surfacing, hospice fraud and abuse. We were a first-hand direct recipient of that, and it was atrocious. Okay. Like many of you, my knowledge and my idea of hospice was this amazing organization that was created, I believe, in late 1950s or early 1960s, and to make the passage, the death process easier, more peaceful, so you're not in the hospital setting. And that they started as a volunteer organizations and continued as such. So anyhow, I basically had this knowledge and the view of hospice, not having dealt with that, as most people here in the United States. And again, these cases of hospice fraud, abuse, atrocious practices, and covert, forced euthanasia, that part of it is just USA, America. That part of it doesn't apply to hospices elsewhere in the world, as far as I know, per my research. And again, the reason for that being your corporate America, everything is about money. Everything about what is your worth? How can corporations make money from you, out of you, using you, right? Utilizing you. When you're in your 30s and 40s, it is how much you make, right? Targeting you with the things that they target 30, 40, 50 years. And your value is actually pretty high because you're a consumer, as a consumer of the big corporation ruled nation, right? And a good way to explain this, I guess, would be court system, because again, the legal justice system was another thing we ended up dealing with during dying, during this atrocious, horrific time. Meaning, when you talk with the judges and the attorneys and etc., they say they have to put a price, a value on you for the justice system. This is the justice system, whether it's the state based or the federal justice system, and the court system, right? The courts, all the way to the appellate courts, etc., and the law firms, all the lawyers and attorneys, and so let's say if you lose somebody does something and causes death of a 6 months old, they look at that and say, well, that was worth nothing, because the 6 years old, we can't assign value and say this was the earning capacity, and this infant was making this much money, and had this infant lived and done 30 years more work, that that would make this infant worth, I don't know, 1.5, $2 million, right? So infants and fetuses don't carry any value. So anybody basically can do anything if you look at it that way. Of course, there's this other side with, oh, well, what happens sometimes with the emotional and the psychological effect of someone doing something to this infant. Well, the same thing applies to the other end, elderly. Okay, this is the spectrum. People who have retired, they are no longer working, right? They're worthless as far as our country is concerned in the eye of the country's justice system. So if you're 68, 70-year old, 75-year old, and you're in a hospital and they intentionally or unintentionally they do something and you die as a result, most of the 90+% of the law firms don't want to have anything to do with your cases. And most courts and judges don't even, they refuse to even take your case. If you're fortunate and your case is filed with the court system, because someone worthless, this has happened to someone worthless. And I'm talking about civil cases here. Criminal cases, I'm going to make a parallel with that, right? Meaning, you're 45, 50, 35 years old, and because of recklessness or intentional or unintentional reason, they do something and they kill you in a US hospital. A doctor, the anesthesiologist, the nursing, whatever, whoever is responsible. Again, when you start going to say, okay, there's a justice system, this person was wrong, was either disabled as a result of that or was murdered, killed as a result of that, right? Good luck if you're over 65, 70 years old, if you're retired. Good luck if you're disabled and because of your disability, you're not working because you, us, we are nothing. There is no value associated with us because our value is only our dollar value. Okay, this is what I mean by a corporation, and by everything being measured in terms of dollar profit value, right? So if you're again 65 or if you're disabled, you're not working, the lawyer says, well, if I take your case, even if you're paying me, I take your case, go to court, I'm going to spend all this time and I have to tell the jury and the judge as a result of their murder, okay, this is civil case, the hospital or a hospice or an elder care home, right? As a result of what they did, this person died or became completely comatose or disabled. And but this person's value is basically is this social security. He's getting or she's getting $1,500 a month. And if he's 65, let's say he has another 10 years to live. Therefore, your value is, I'm just going to throw a number here, not even $300,000, right? I don't want to take your case. And the judges won't accept your case. Most judges don't. They're like, well, that person was, done with, doesn't have any value in our society. And good luck with some judges taking it, but I'm not going to take this case. I want to take a case of the woman or the guy where he is 30, 35, and he has really good salary, where I can say, by doing this to this person, they remove 25 years times $100,000. Then we are looking at, 2 million, $3 million. Same thing with the judges. I had never come in touch with this world. Okay, why would I? Right? We lived our lives, we worked, right? We did the right things, right, in terms of what you can do and saving, doing all those stuff. And we were also fortunate. We were very fortunate because we um, were very healthy throughout my husband's entire life, over 70 years, and my life up until 4 years ago. And this was our medical record, right? Have you ever been hospitalized? Nope. Have you ever suffered from this? No, 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 no. Are you on any medication? No. So, when they hand you these forms that are 30, 35 pages, it was instead of going no, 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 what we usually did, I mean, because it gets kind of exasperating going through these pages, boom, check mark, check mark. We took the pen and we went, part of it, I guess, is being fortunate. Part of it is due to the genes. Again, that's being fortunate, maybe part of it lifestyle. We were always very wary of taking meds. You know, you take this for this tiny thing you have, you take. We have always been anti meds unless it's really, really necessary, right? So, because of that, I'm just giving this as a background. It's not to gloat to say, oh my goodness, we were such a healthy family because we had amazing diet and we had what a great exercise routine. No, no, I'm just telling you to give you the context and say it hit us, and unless you're in it, you would never know because it's almost like a parallel universe. We never dealt with the U.S. hospital system ever. Now, I have had lots of experience with hospitals around the world. My father was a doctor, he was a surgeon, and my father raised me. Okay, so I was partially abandoned by my mother. So I was my father's soulmate, he was my soulmate, he was a political activist, and he was an altruistic, idealistic doctor. You won't find many here. It's kind of an unusual concept where he took his Hippocratic oath very, very seriously, and half of his career was volunteerism by volunteering in war front. And he would take me with him. I have been to Afghanistan during the Afghan Soviet war, and I was only 10-year old, 10, 11 years old, okay? I have been, I had seen regular hospitals where my father worked, university, high end hospitals where my father taught and worked as a surgeon, as a doctor. I had seen makeshift hospitals in various parts of third world, right? Firsthand. And that was my experience, but I never had any experience with the US healthcare system. We didn't have, we being our family, we never had any experience with the US hospitals, right? I mean, we were fortunate, but at the same time, we were caught off guard. I had no idea how horrific, how horrible our whole system is here, and a murdering system. So, again, no experience on that. So we ended up being a target of a very major case of hospice fraud, Medicare fraud. This hospice made close to $100,000. Okay, and I will again explain in a segment uh, of its own, like brand new things, hospice. And towards the end, I'm just giving you a little bit of update here on why I have been MIA and in what state of physical and mind and emotional I have been, because you're my community, and it took this long to gather the ability, the courage, to the stamina to do it. But hey, better late than never, correct? So I'm just putting it out here, and the final 4 days of our journey, dying, death journey, ended up being in a hospital when it became the pissing contest during this death, horrific death between hospice and hospital. The hospital refusing admitting my husband as a patient because he had pneumonia. When I talked to you on in that video, I said we went and we had multiple diagnoses from multiple places, the final one being from a very good place, Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. And we were given, they can't give you the exact estimate or precise mortality, how long you have to live. They give you a window based on how healthy your body is or was when you were diagnosed with ALS, right? Your emotional and your physical state, and the progression of the ALS or diseases such as ALS, and they tell you you can expect anywhere between 2 to 4 years. That was what we were told when I made that video, and that video went up in June 2021. My husband died on January 6th, 2022. So that would be about 7 months after that video. And when we were told because of all these factors, we had 2 to 4 years. And he didn't die from ALS. He was going to die from ALS. We already had accepted that. We were not in denial of any kind of some sort of thing that's going to happen because there is no cure, unfortunately, for ALS. But my husband ended up with a pneumonia, and this is during the time when he was paralyzed by about 80%. Both his legs, he had lost functions on both legs, and he had lost function 90% in one arm, 75%, 80% in another arm, the entire hand. So basically, just like you will see in some ALS cases, he was functional from like chin up, and emotionally you're intact with ALS, and he was. Your mental faculty and his was IQ 154 and totally sharp, intact. It's just that you don't have the control and any functions, motor function. It's a neurodegenerative disease. So you're aware of your surrounding, and he had trained himself, with the eye. He could communicate because he also had lost his speaking ability during the last 2 months. He couldn't, but he could with one of his hand that he had 20% function, he could text, and with his eye movement he can communicate. He could write letters, 2.5, 3 pages of letters, perfect grammar, perfectly polished without the use of AI. We never have used AI. I still haven't used any AI functions. He still took care of all our accounting. He caught pneumonia, and pneumonia becomes extremely dangerous, especially, I mean, it's a horrible, dangerous thing, but it becomes far more dangerous when you're in that shape. You are paralyzed, and you have swallowing functions that have deteriorated. So it needs to be treated right away, and that's what he had. And after the hospice that we dealt with, instead of looking at his pneumonia and treating it, they brought bottles of morphines. Um, this is the last 4 or 5 days. Thank you. They brought bottles of morphines, and they're like, pump him with morphine, even though it says here we have to legally put every 4 hours this dosage. You just keep pumping him so that he's not in any distress. The doctor's daughter. I'm like, my husband is antibiotics. He needs non-invasive ventilator for breathing due to his pneumonia, and he was not in pain. ALS doesn't come with pain. You don't have any pain. My husband's answer was always, when he was asked, from the scale of 0 to 10, what's your pain level? He would be saying zeros. He would say, oh, he would mouth, oh, he had no pain. Why are you giving us these? And basically, they were asking me to kill my husband. This is during the last 5 days before he died, and they would give the morphines, and they would refuse to provide all the other things that they were obligated to provide, and then say we had no right to contact hospital, and any hospitals, go to hospitals. And my husband, until like almost the last minute, he didn't want to go to hospitals because we had heard what had happened during COVID, families being separated. Granted, this was the tail end of COVID, and they had already lifted those restrictions, most of them in hospitals, in Florida at least, right? You still have to wear the mask and everything, but that isolation was like the tail end of that. So we ended up in a hospital, and in the emergency room, in the emergency room section of it, they said, this is like a human rights abuse, what this hospice had told us and had done, that they should have given him antibiotic. Yes, he had infection, and in his bronchitis was turning into pneumonia. He had to be given IV. He was 90% dehydrated and the non invasive ventilator. Okay. So my daughter at the time, she was 12. We were in this position saying, okay, now we're going to get help, and he's going to get better. We can come home. After the emergency session, even though we had told them that we wanted him to be inpatient in hospital, unbeknown to us, the fraudulent hospice agency we dealt with, had called this hospital and told them to keep him under hospice status and put him in a room, in hospital room, without any IV, without any antibiotics, without any non-invasive ventilators, and you just provide end-of-life care via hospice. We didn't even know about that. Not only that, they didn't let me stay with him after 10 p.m. At 10 p.m., the specialistic nurse would come and say, you need to leave now. It's 10 o'clock. You need to leave now. And they did not let my daughter see her father during the 4 days in hospital. And so we had the most traumatic time during the first 2 nights. And the third night, after they kicked me out, and I went the next morning to hospital, and my daughter, they made her stand hours and hours outside the hospital by the elevator in the hallway because I didn't want to leave my husband alone. Um, my husband, with communication ability that he had left, told me that the evenings, they would not come, the nurses. He would ring the bell because he would be suffocating almost on his because of the functional thing with ALS, with your swallowing functions not being there. And it was a night of hell, which I just went ballistic and went to the managers in hospital. They're like, yes, I know you're telling us that he's no longer hospice. We have put the request, but the computer hasn't updated it. Again, these are the things I will discuss in some different sessions later, but this is part of telling you, wow, I can. That's why we were away and lots of things happened. And what those things were, what the results of those things were, and so that you understand because you are my community. Um, I was on after he told me that, and I go and you have, and we are living in one of the richest cities in the country. We have more billionaires than 99% of the country. I think we are either second or third in terms of the ratio. Naples, Florida, okay? Like we are living in this like really rich people's area. I mean, uber rich area, right? This is not a third world country. And this is not in some boonies somewhere where you have like really primitive medical facilities and healthcare stuff, okay? All right. I was in front of this hospital in Naples, Florida, because they were not providing my husband. This is day three, antibiotics, IV. He's dying there, and they're not letting me stay with him. I'm calling the Florida's healthcare department. Of course, you know how it is with these phone calls. You're on the phone for 30 minutes. They put you on hold. I'm pacing in front of the hospital. My daughter is standing there by the elevator, still begging to see her dad. Then they're like, well, we can't help you. Call the ombudsman. I'm calling some ombudsman. I'm placed on hold. And the ombudsman says, I'm saying this is what they're doing. This is illegal. My husband, you can't say he can't have inpatient status. That's his wish. He's not incapacitated. It's my wish. It's his family's wish. This is the situation. And the ombudsman says, oh, hospitals are not in our jurisdictions. Hospices are not in jurisdictions. Only private elder care facilities and private, some crap like this. I go back to the room, to my husband's room in the hospital, and I say, tomorrow morning, I'm coming here and I'm going to bring attorneys. I'm going to go grab lawyers And I'm going to come to this room to address this, right? And by this time, it's been 3, 4 days. I have had zero sleep, not even 1 minute of sleep, right? You can just imagine. If you know, you know. And I know some of the people here tuning in, they are part of my new community that I have become part of. There is a Facebook page called Murdered by Hospice. After all these things happen, I haven't forgotten, I'm not being sidetracked. I'm telling you about Murdered by Hospice. Initially, when all these things happened to us, horrific things, I thought it was something really unusual that is like 1 in a million or 10 million case. But later, once I started researching and etc., I found out that this has been happening all over our country to tens of thousands of people, both in the hospice part of it and the hospital part of it. Okay, again, that's like a multi-session topic. All right. So I said, I'm coming out, and I still had, even though by this time I was really not in good shape, going through some really horrific 7 months. I was covered with shingles. My immune system had shut down because I was not only the primary caregiver, I was the only caregiver, my daughter and I. And I said, honey, to my husband, I said, honey, I am I am Sibel Edmonds. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna bring armies of attorneys here. I'm gonna stop this because by then it was like 5 p.m. And the next morning I said they were gonna kick me out at 10 p.m. I'm coming with attorneys to put an end to this torture, to this abuse, to this torment. And we're gonna start you on antibiotics and we're gonna start you with the IV and the non-invasive ventilator. Okay. That's how I left that hospital at 10 p.m. on that Wednesday, January 5th. And as I promised, the next morning, I was calling and I was driving and I went to a law firm and I found out that there is this lawyers, they call them patients advocate lawyers. You still have to pay $300, $400 per hour. Why would you need a lawyer to advocate for patients? I mean, that's part of the Hippocratic oath. That's what doctors are supposed to be doing and are doing everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world, because I have experience with hospitals and doctors around the world. Not here. Same thing for the nurses. But no, in our country, okay, not only that you need to have the money or the insurance and everything, and a lot of it, you also have to go and hire an attorney to advocate for you in the hospitals. I've never heard of such a thing. This is despicable. This is so outrageous. There is no nation in this world. There has never been any nation in this world where this is the state of the healthcare industry, corporate industry, healthcare. Um, I That morning, I went and they told me that they helped me find, and actually, this attorney called this patient advocate attorney. And after talking with this patient advocate attorney lady, he hung up and he said, no, no, Sibel, go to your husband, go to the hospital. This attorney, whatever her name is, she's going to come and meet you in the room by noon. Okay. So I left this law firm, right? And it's about 20 minutes drive from the hospital where my husband is. And right as I got into my car, I pulled out my cell phone because I have been communicating. It's like, I'm on my way to the attorney, I'm coming there and this is going to be resolved today, honey. Don't worry, it's going to be resolved. So I sent a text to my husband and I said, I'm on my way. Help is coming. This is going to end. This torture, this abuse is going to end. As I got into my car, I brought back my previous text, and my husband always responded to my text. That's the only way. When I was not physically with him, he could stay still connected with me, even if he would press just the letter K for okay, like I'm reading it. So I looked at my previous text that I sent my husband, and this was around 5 minutes to 9, and he had not responded. And by now it was like quarter to 11 in the morning on January 6th, 2022. So I look at it, and this is the first. My husband has never, ever, ever not responded to my text. But I'm just overjoyed, like I'm ending this torment that we have been put through. I'm speeding, driving to the hospital. That 20 minutes, I made it there in 13 minutes because I'm looking at the time and I'm looking. I parked my car and I just ran to the hospital. I ran towards the elevator, and the guard, the receptionist person stopped me at the hospital, says, ma'am, you have to get what is it, the tag, the name tag and everything. So that took another 2 minutes. I took the elevator. I went up to the fourth floor. And this is at 11:05, 11:10 a.m., January 6th, Thursday, 2022. And got out of the elevator. I went to the room, and I walked into the room, and I just stopped short. I looked at the bed. My husband was dead. Uh, he should have never been on his back with that pneumonia and due to his ALS, but he was dropped on his back. He should have never been on his back, and he was dead. And I had seen dead bodies in my life before. Not only that he was dead, I my nobody knew, and he is in the hospital. Is in the regular parts of the hospital. Not only that he was dead, he was not dead like for, let's say that you're dead for half an hour. My husband had rigor mortis already set. My husband was in the United States of America, in one of the richest cities in the state of Florida, Naples, Florida, had been dead on his hospital bed for at least 6 hours. Uh, at that point, I almost, it was like out of body experience because I went through the motion. Those of you who are familiar with my background, I have a degree, bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal psychology, but I had a minor. My minor was on forensic science, and I also worked with the former FBI lab director for my internship for a year, Dr. Frederick Whitehurst. We reinvestigated Oklahoma City's bombing forensic files because he had blown the whistle on it, etc. And as I said, I had been on War Front both as journalist, but also as a kid, tagging along with my father. I went and I touched my husband, and I knew, and I registered the body temperature and the rigor level. I took the room temperature. At that point, I was not even myself. I was like some crime scene investigator going to a room. I had just disconnected. I had completely, I was out. I was just going like a robot, and I took photos. I took about 15 photos. The fact that there was no IV per order from the emergency room where he got admitted to the hospital. There were no ventilators. And this room that he was in this hospital, room 460, initially I thought it was such a lucky thing. It was right in front of the nurses' station, where all the nurses, they have their computers, they come and go. And I actually went from the door to the nurse's station, and it was 4.5 feet from the edge of the door to the nurse's station, right? I did that. And I looked at and this, I took note of if they were in overcapacity status, the hospital. No, actually, it was under because there was 1.5 patients per nurse. I registered that, and during this whole thing of being dissociated from yourself, I actually made phone calls and had my daughter's teacher bring my daughter. She's a friend also to the hospital. They arrived, and still no nurse and nobody had come into that room. And I didn't even think of the fact that I'm having maybe 12 years old walk into the room and seeing her father in that shape. But I was not thinking as a mother, you're supposed to be notifying next of kin. Like, I'm trying to describe the level of disconnect that I am there and I'm functioning because the level of emotion and everything is just so incredibly high that you either collapse, right, have some sort of a seizure at that point, or you have to disconnect, and that's not unusual with some severe trauma cases. So I did all that, and I want to apologize if this is not what you expected when you started watching this. I don't know. Hopefully, those of you who can't stand things like this have already moved on, and I need to catch my breath. That was not actually the end of it. How my husband was murdered. It was like a joint murder between hospice and the hospital in Naples, Florida. And the hospital death certificate that they immediately issued, the temporary one before they sent you the sealed one, said my husband died from natural causes, ALS, and that his body failed, his heart and everything failed based on that. My husband died from pneumonia and choking on his own saliva because he had been dropped on his back. And this is not all, because when I discovered my husband's body in rigor mortis in the hospital, which I photographed and everything, my husband on the hospital bed, on his back, the body position, he had his cell phone on his chest, right next to his heart, and his rigored finger and hand was on top of his cell phone. Okay. And at the end, when they came to take away his body, I took his cell phone and the other things he had, and we left the hospital with those. Um, are you ready for this? Some of you may have heard me talking about this during my community podcast with my community at Patreon, but it may be new for those of you who were not, you know, part of that podcast that I had a couple of months ago. But when we came home that evening from hospital, my daughter said, "Oh, my dad's cell phone is almost out of battery." She said, "Mama, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna charge my dad's phone." I said, "Okay." So she went to my bedroom because that's where I had kept the charger, and connected this my husband's cell phone to the charger. And I was still in the living room because our dog was almost starving because our dog was neglected during this 2 days that I was in the hospital. Um, we didn't have any friends or family here in Naples. Don't have any. Um, she said from my bedroom, she said, "Mama, you need to come to the room. There are videos on my dad's cell phone." So I thought first she was referring to maybe the pictures I had taken in the hospital. So I came to the bedroom and we looked at my husband's cell phone. Um, there were about 12, 13 videos from 12 a.m. Thursday morning till about the last one was 5:11, 5:10 a.m. And we started playing the videos. Remember, when I came to the hospital that the day before, my husband said the night before nobody was coming and they were turning off not only his, he could hear other rooms. The nurses were turning off emergency, the sound that comes when patients in the room dispatches the nurse, right? My husband, having gone through that experience, as he was dying, choking and moaning and asking for help, he documented his death on his cell phone and videotaped how many times he rang the bell. It was right to the right side of his hospital bed, and his room is right in front of the nurse's station, 4.5 foot, okay, 4.5 feet, and then you're there from the edge of his door. 13 times it seemed he would ring the bell, and you could hear the video. He's showing himself in the video, his hand, the bell, the ringing the bell. A nurse answering, saying, "Yes, what do you need?" And my husband says something like moaning because he had lost his speech due to ALS. But we couldn't make out what he was saying. He was saying, "I'm choking, help me, choking, help me." This nurse was something like, "I don't understand." Then he would get, because he's paralyzed. He's 90% paralyzed. Then another video. He asked and begged and moaned and begged and cried for help, ringing that bell. No nurse came to his room as he died. With the being on his back, pneumonia and the ALS, and not being to swallow, right? And being paralyzed, not being able to turn, your saliva, as it goes down, you're choking, and it's very similar to waterboarding. Those of you who are familiar with the waterboarding. So between all these and a lot of details that I'm not going to get into, I had to perform autopsy to tell them that the hospital did, and the autopsy proved that he was 90% dehydrated, was never given IV, that he died from pneumonia. He had pneumonia, and he had the infection and bronchitis, that there were no antibiotics. The hospital for 4 days refused to give him any of these. Not a makeshift hospital. In makeshift hospitals along the wars, all the ones I have been, no nurse or no doctors, no hospital, makeshift hospital would do these. Between that and the discovery of the videos, graphic videos, we have my husband documenting his death in a hospital room. I guess if you know, you know. If you don't know, some of you may be able to imagine. My husband and I, we were married for 32 years, and we used to joke about it, and you know half joke about it, and say, ours equals almost like 7 years being married, because 26 years of this 32 years of being together, uh, we were together 24 by 7 practically. We worked together after he left his previous positions, retired from that job. He was working with me. He was also consulting, but from his home office. And every almost 99% of the trips that I went for journalism and research reasons, my husband was with me. So we worked together, we lived together, we raised our daughter together. I worked from home too. So we were together 24 by 7. Okay. So our connection and all that was like at a very kind of an unusual level. He was not only my husband, he was my best friend, he was my partner, he was my soulmate, he was my everything. Okay. And during this whole ALS journey, and as even we went through these traumas, some of the things that have nothing to do with ALS, but when you're in this situation, you get to see and experience things. Things are done to you that when you're strong, when you're strong, you're not in that vulnerable state, you will never come in touch with, thankfully. But the thing is, they come. Um, during even during the time that we filmed the last video that I have a link for you there in my other channel. On every day, daily basis, every single day, we had this thing, my daughter and I told my husband several times a day. Sometimes I would say it, I'm looking this way because my daughter is sitting there. Sometimes we would say it together, and to my husband, because we after the diagnosis, after finding out how ALS is, etc., how we were going to deal with it, what this journey, how he wanted this journey, what is the best way to go through this horrific journey, all that we always discuss. And I used to tell him, and with a promise, this was my promise, right? Honey, I would say, honey, until that last second, until that last breath, we're going to be with you. We're going to be together. We're going to be holding your hands. You're going to be in our arms. We're going to be holding hands, honey, until that last breath, until that last second. Well, they took that away. And that's the promise that it had let me fulfill. Okay. And as a result of all that, and I used to think of myself because I was, I guess, to a certain degree, I was a war baby. I had gone through coups and wars and being a war refugee, being an immigrant. I have seen ups, my share, and plus my share of ups and downs. My Supreme Court case, whistleblowing, all sorts of harassments that happened during my whistleblowing journey. So you would not really characterize me as someone who's, you know, not familiar with hardship. You know, I was, but nothing ever brought me down on my knees ever. You would fall, I would get up immediately, I would dust my knees, and I would run, and I would say, yes, we're gonna do this. We're gonna. Life gives you lemons, you make lemonades. I was one of those people. Okay, for 50 plus years, I was one of those people. But the ALS journey, what happened to us, what they did to us, this whole circumstances that I told you about, that did me in, okay? That really brought me down on my knees severely. Um, Within the first 2 months, after the videos, discovery of the videos, and discovering my husband's body in a hospital and the autopsy and all this stuff, I lost 35 pounds. I was like 94 pounds. Um, I had uncontrollable tremors like on my hand, but then I had my left side was paralyzed. Okay, it's almost like a stroke patient. Like I had my wrist and my paralyzed. I could not sleep. If you looked at me, you see these muscle necks, the two, you would see it like this really spasm and pulsing chords here instead, right? And my jaw would lock in one place. I had, again, I was covered with shingles. I, wa- I was taken to not hospital because I can't go to even, I can't even drive by a hospital to urgent cares when they said she needs to go to hospital because she's having heart attack. And they're like, you have heart arrhythmia. Your record says you've never had that. So a lot of health things happen, and all of those health things were concluded as a result of severe trauma, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Again, I was familiar, not personally, okay, not personally. I was familiar with PTSD because of my organization, National Security Whistleblowers Coalition, that I formed. 75% of our members, FBI, DIA, CIA, they were former military, right? And many of them had been in Vietnam War. And of those people, I would say at least eight, nine of them, since the Vietnam War era, after the war ended, after they came home, they were suffering from severe PTSD. So they would share some of the, experiences with me. So it would be secondhand. But also, I studied psychology, and PTSD was always like an interesting topic for me. But it was PTSD and severe PTSD, like the ones that they consider like you won't have even 6 months to live because your cortisol level is so high that it's not even going up and down anymore. So what happens is, you know, fight and flight system, sympathetic, parasympathetic system, and you're in that mode, right? With your muscles locked in, your heart, like I never had blood pressure, high blood pressure. I was never on any medication in my life. It would read 160 over 130. All my life, my blood pressure, no matter when people, whether during checkups or if you had it would be something like 110 over 65 or 115 over 70. That was mine. It was that. And that I started bleeding because with the cortisol level and this tension and the pressure with also internal organs, your capillaries start breaking, right? The capillaries on the skin starts breaking, on your face starts breaking, right? That same thing happens internally with your internal organs. I would have these bleedings from my kidney. They're like, oh, it must be a kidney stone. Then they would check, no, there's nothing, there's no stone. The kidney's fine. Let's check the bladder. Bladder's fine. And it's like these capillaries are broken. So it was that bad and really, really bad. So what happens is after 2, 3 months of being in that mode, your body's functional system resets itself to this mode. Meaning, even when no trigger is present, right? Even when there is like there is like nothing triggering that, it just stays that you are that's your default functional mode. Like with the computer, you have to turn it off and turn it on and reset it. So they said to reset it, I have to, they, with PTSD, especially when it was at this level for the first 1.5 years, what do they do? What do they do? Okay, this is what they do. Take this medicine, lorazepam, the anti-anxiety to ease this situation with you. Alprazopam and lorazepam, and then take this for the insomnia, like so you can sleep and induce sleep. So it's like pills, 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 right? And always being so wary of being a over medicated nation. What is this with? I've always been like, I'm not a pill popper, okay? But they were begging me. They're like, at least they're addictive too. Alprazopam, lorazepam, all this stuff. And that's not going to cure you because you know what's causing this is all the emotional, mental stuff that you have gone through and the body keeping the score of all that. And it's like going haywire, right? So taking these pills is like you temporarily numb it and kind of disconnect those neurons from doing what they're doing with this default system. But for how long? Then they go and say, oh, okay, you also need to pair it up with things like psychotherapy. Nothing worked. And the pills, sure, I took it because I didn't want to leave my daughter an orphan. So I'm a single mother now. She's 12. And with all the stuff I'm going through, it's like I have to live, not because I want to live. I really don't want to live. That's what I was saying. I have zero desire to live, right? And this is not like depression talking, okay. Ordinarily, people say your loved one dies, you go through the grieving process. Well, with these types of terminal diseases, when people are fighting cancer, Parkinson, ALS, you actually go through prolonged grief because your grieving process, that grief process starts long before that. It starts the moment you're told that that is coming. Yeah, that is coming for everyone, for all of us, but in this form, and you have 6 months to 1 year or whatever you have, right? So there is that prolonged grief. And it's expected. You lose someone, you go through depression, you go through insomnia. Like there are stages of grief and prolonged, complicated grief. Mine, our type of grief is even, but then you add to all that PTSD. It's like, how do you deal with this thing? After trying different psychotherapy and things getting worse, and meanwhile I'm MIA, people. This is all explaining why I have been away. Even the best psychiatrists and psychologists that no, yours, it's so severe that psychotherapy is not working. You need to look at some of these alternative ones. So they're putting in front of me psilocybin, mushroom therapy. um, I get even accepted to some program, the trial studies in Baltimore, but I'm not going to leave my daughter and go. It's like she's a kid, right? um, And after taking those pills, the lorazepam and alprazolam and all that, it's just like got to a point saying, I can't, I don't, I'm not going to be a pill popper. None of these things working. A year into it, I came up with my own way of trying to deal with it. And that was, we locked ourselves inside our house. So there will be no triggers, right? Because so many triggers would start all these symptoms. We Nobody comes in, nobody gets out. 90% of groceries and things are done via phone. We buried ourselves, we have inside the house, avoiding any human being, situation 99% of the time. When I say we, it's my daughter. And that kind of, well, that's not the way to live. I know people say, well, that's not the way to deal with it. But look, lorazepam, alprazolam, that's like a forever kind of a thing. Psychotherapy and blah blah, and that's not working. Um, so and then you go through this, and urgent care, we don't have insurance. That is not so. The only thing I could think of, like, avoid everyone and avoid everything, which we did. We lived inside the house. Sometimes my daughter would say, "It's been 19 days, Mama, since we've been out of the house." I guess in some countries during COVID, their lockdown was so bad that people would be. But that's just, I know it sounds really insane, but that's how it was. And it's not like, well, what did you do in the house? I tried a lot of different things. I would be researching. I would be researching everything PTSD, everything hospice, everything ALS, everything hospital, and then expanding that. But more importantly, this is actually something positive. My daughter also, in her way, she being traumatized and having gone through what she went through, she said, and she had just finished middle school. She's 13. She said, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to be out in the regular high school. Homeschool me. And I could see her point, with everything that was going on with her. She experienced all these things as a 12, 13-year old, right? I experienced it as a 51-year-old. And so I had to think about my own abilities. Can I homeschool with all the stuff? Will I be a good homeschooler? Am I going to be a good teacher for her? But she was adamant. Okay, how is the sound now? I'm sorry. We had a glitch with our sound. Can you hear me now? No? I don't know. It's the green, the light. Should we switch? Now, can you hear me? You can hear me now? Chargers, battery charger into this? You can bring my charger. Hmm. Is that on? Can you hear me now? Is this synced? Thank you for your patience. Just as we got into something positive. Can you hear me now? Okay. Why don't we? You can hear me now? My daughter can't communicate with me. You can hear me. It's working. Do we need to put the charger on this? Because I have the charger on the table. So right now we are all good with sound. Okay, something positive. Why would it do this? When we came to something positive. So my daughter said, okay. And I said, all right, it was gonna be the case. We were going to homeschool. And not only that, we went further than that. We went actually crazy further than that. Now that I look back and I say, how in the world did we do it? My daughter, she always loved school, but she always was a perfectly average student. That's how you would characterize her. And she was never ambitious. She was so happy to get her B's, once in a while C's. Unlike her mother, who always has been type A personality. If I get something less than A, if it's A minus, I am retaking that course. That's how I used to be, way back when. My daughter is like, nope. And her favorite topics always anything composition, American literature, anything literature, English literature, and anything social science, political science, psychology, sociology. By the age 10, 11, this girl was like a walking encyclopedia. I mean, for her, she could just go and take a high school level at the age 10, civics and gov, and she would pass. Now, math, we never did that good in math. It was a lot of help and everything trying to secure a B minus. So that was with math. Science, so, B's and C's. Anyhow, um, one day, a few days after we decided are you following the chats to see if anybody has issues? Thank you. A few days after we decided, she's now 13 at this point, we're going to do homeschooling. She said something like, my dad, he finished high school before he turned 16, and he finished university at 18, and he had his, they put him on PhD. That my husband was like the gifted program and all those stuff in 1950s. So that's a different story. She said, I want to make my father proud and I want to graduate before 16 from high school. And I said, oh my God, now we are taking homeschooling, right? Trying to work our way through this. But then I thought, why not? You know, why not? We have locked ourselves in. We have zero contact with the outside world. I'm going through all this stuff still, but much less so when there is like no trigger. We are not outside. There are no fluorescent lights. Believe me, things like tiny sound would send me to the roof. Uh, One day my daughter dropped her like backpack, school bag, on the floor, and I was on the floor. I went into seizure because of all the stuff with PTSD. So anyhow, let's go back to the positive stuff. We have people here. Everybody is bored. Everybody's like, "What? Why aren't you talking about Operation Gladio?" Because there's going to be plenty of time to talk about it. I want to get this part out of the way. Not like as if it's a torture or anything. I just want to share because that also for our community that some of you have been with me for so long, um, it makes me feel more comfortable because I don't have any notes here. I'm just flowing. Okay, I'm flowing with you. I'm flowing with my friends here. That's how I feel right now when I'm talking. um, I said, why not? We can take on, let's make a pledge. We want to finish your high school under 2 years, but we want to get everything A. Everything has to be like 100. And she said, I'm in. I said, okay, I'm in too. That gave us a track, people. That gave us a focus. We finished high school. My daughter finished high school full fledged, talking about taking every single course. That was 26 total under 15 months, all A except one B for math. She graduated from high school by the age 15. Then we went and we registered her with the community college. I love community colleges. Community colleges, they have a special place in my heart. How is the sound quality? Good? Okay. So my daughter, and I actually am so proud to share this. She just 2 months ago, she turned 17. She got her AA degree, okay, with honor from the community college here in Naples, Florida. She already got her scholarship and transferred everything, 63 credits to FGCU. It's a university here. And this semester is her first semester junior year. And we are on track to graduate before she turns 19. So technically, she will be 18 when she has her bachelor's degree. And her passion is law. And she's currently pre law. And for pre law, she's doing political science with a minor in history. So let's just say cheers because I really, 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 really am proud of how much hard work she put in this. So what I'm trying to say is, you may ask like, what in the world would a person do when she isolates herself with her daughter in a house with maybe going out once every 15, 16 days if we had to, and that was if we had to, right? Not associating with anyone. I ceased contact with anyone and everyone I knew, maybe two or three people. And even that would be, occasional. My phone ringer had been placed and still is permanently on off button because even like a phone ringing, any kind of a ring sound, doesn't matter if it's calm or it's like serenity filled kind of a music, because phone, I guess somewhere out there you kind of associated with all the horrible phone calls. There were a lot of bad phone related things. So anyhow, and I also want to make sure I emphasize I am not sharing any of these. I know with my friends and community that's a non-issue. I'm not doing this to, evoke some sort of a sympathy or a pity or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I have done, where I have been, why, because that's important. That's also important in terms of what I will be doing. And then your next logical question may be, well, how did you cure yourself? I'm not cured. There's no such a thing as cure, just like with people say with alcoholism. You always, even if you're in a program for 10 years, you have to keep at it. You don't say, okay, done, I'm cured, I'm no longer an alcoholic. It's similar thing with PTSD. The improvement, enough improvement to do this with you, to resurface on the internet, at least to say, hello, I'm here, right? Doing that. And also, I did the audiobook for my book, Classified Woman. what what triggered that? How what led to the last 6 months improvement? I started a therapy called EMDR, okay, eye movement desensitization, which is combined with some other techniques here. No, that didn't by itself do anything. I guess isolation in some way helped with some kind of a part, part partial healing. And again, healing may be not the right word, but you know what happens, right? Like you get a scar, right? You have a scar, and and before that permanent scab comes, you get like this tiny little scab, like a soft tissue forming on that scar. And if you take the band-aid off too early and pick on it or even run your finger through it, bam, it comes out and you're in ground, you're on ground one, step one, you have to start again. And if you keep doing it, it doesn't heal, right? So in some ways, I would say, partially at least, removing everything from your life and saying all the triggers, because the triggers, there are like so many different triggers. Some of them I could predict, like I would avoid this because I know it's a trigger. And sometimes you do that, but then something else triggers something that you had never had experience with, and you didn't know that that was a trigger. So you can't go and identify all the triggers and say, well, I'm going to avoid all these triggers, or because I have identified them, because sometimes you're not able to identify all of them. Anyhow, it was, in some ways it was that letting at least the soft tissue form on the top of this broken 30-pound weight loss, tremors and all that. Homeschooling my daughter took a lot of efforts and energy. A lot of things she didn't even need help with. As I said, literature, English, and social science stuff, no. But I also spent a lot of time doing education and research, even on topics that people would say, "Why in the world are you studying all these books on real estate?" Like, I don't know, it's interesting. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about our broken corporate healthcare system. It's like there is nothing like it anywhere in the world. Take this from someone who has lived in more than 8, 9 countries. Like when you live somewhere for more than a year, it's called not like a tourist going somewhere or living somewhere for 2, 3 weeks. That's living. As someone who has traveled to over 48, 50 countries, I'm telling you, this is truly American. Okay. And then we will get into it. And because my mind works in this way, saying, I want to know why. When you're with kids, it's really interesting. You can tell with children. Again, I love psychology. There are kids who would be asking a lot of what questions, right? Like, mommy, what's that? What's this? Oh, what is that? Pay attention. And then you come across people and kids who ask a lot of questions. Who said that? Who did that? Who was wearing that? It's like people who, for me, as a kid, since the beginning, everything was about why. I want to find out why. It would drive your parents crazy. It's like, this, but why? How come? So with this broken system that we have, the broken healthcare system, broken hospice system, elder abuse, hospice murder, and those of you interested in the topic, please check out on the Facebook, Murdered by Hospice, and there you can also find wealth of information, articles, tremendous. I mean, this is so widespread, and the covert forced euthanasia has become a common practice, right? Also, a book was written by someone who I consider a friend now, Marsha Joyner. It's called Betrayed by Hospice and Healthcare. She went through her loss with her mother, and she has been an amazing, relentless activist. So I'm part of their group. Check that book out. But you kind of start asking the question, why? Why, of all the hospices, why is it like this here in the United States? This is murder, okay? They are committing murder. It doesn't matter where you stand on topics such as voluntary euthanasia, okay? It was something that even my husband and I discussed. And one thing he said was, because we went through all these forums on ALS, and you see people in various stage, and you keep reading, you keep watching, you're joining these meetings, online Zoom meetings with other ALS patients through the ALS clinic and everything. And so it's horrific. So he said, okay, let's talk about everything. Let's think about everything. And where do you stand in terms of euthanasia? And you know what he said, and I completely agreed with him. He said, maybe I would have even maybe considered thought about it if I knew my mind, that goes. But your intelligence, your thinking ability is there. You hear perfectly fine, perfectly well. You see perfectly well. Your intelligence, your emotions, your mental faculty, all of that are intact. And he said to me, he said, the joy of looking at Ella, our daughter, playing guitar, listening to her and looking at her, the joy of watching you cook and bring the food, especially when you know you have such little time. It's like until the last breath, no matter how hard, it's the joy to be with my daughter and to be with my love of my life, with you, right? Same thing applies to me. So what I'm trying to say is there are people who would say, okay, I want to, as an adult, with my mental faculties intact, emotionally in a good, in a place that I can have the ability and a good judgment. I would say, okay, I want to have euthanasia. I don't want to argue with those things. People should have the right and choices. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about covert forced euthanasia, right? So I can say truly that I have become to a certain degree an expert on healthcare and on hospice. When I was working with my community here, it was mostly geopolitical analysis, political analysis, First Amendment, freedom of speech related stuff. Okay. Add to that, there are things I know and I have delved deeply in that I didn't before. And these are the things that I wanna is part of why I have made the comeback. Because as I was saying during one of these EMDR sessions, I just blurted out. I said something like, all these things happen, and on top of it, I'm carrying this also, I don't want to, guilt or whatever you want to call it, pressure, saying I am letting him down, I'm letting everyone who ever liked me down. This is one of the reasons I don't want to see anyone, I don't want to talk with anyone. I'm erasing everything because I also see myself in some ways as a disappointment. Okay, I crumbled PTSD, and look at me, and I'm doing like nothing in terms of all this. And as was talking about this, it just something hit me. My calling when I was a teenager was orphanages, okay? I started volunteering, working in orphanages at the age 16 in Istanbul. In 1992, my husband and I moved to Russia. We were in St. Petersburg, once upon a time, Leningrad. And as he did his work consulting for a children hospital center there, I worked with orphanages there. I worked with orphanages in Romania. I worked with orphanages in Vietnam. I lived in Vietnam for a year and a half. Okay, my whole calling was I wanted to adopt three children, and my daughter is from Vietnam. Orphanages was my calling, and then because of my father's activism, being an anti-war person. That was always my calling, okay? Geopolitics and politics, in some ways, not in a partisan way, not in some ways that some people would define, was always my calling. But then this thing happened with the FBI, 9/11, and whistleblowers' rights, right? The cover up on 9/11, and the justice and the need for justice on 9/11, that became my calling. So if you look at it, from the outside, you would say, even I myself, when I look at it, like I step out and look at, and I keep thinking, I sometimes ask myself, I say, why in the world I'm always dealing with like all the dark stuff, you know, orphanages, and yes, it's uplifting when you're doing things right with orphanages, yes, but it comes with its own heaviness and darkness, right? Then I was a CASA, court appointed a special advocate. I worked for on 11 cases over 5 years, representing sexually abused children and foster care children. That was horribly dark and heavy, like really dark, heavy area. And why I sometimes envy like these people who are doing the cooking channel, because I love to cook, and they're talking about food, and they're talking about like beautiful renovation. That's why I was doing a lot of things on real estate and renovation during my MIA years. I always end up this because I guess that's my calling. Okay. So instead of fighting it, I guess I'm I say instead of fighting it, just accept it. Okay. That's your calling. All right. It comes from somewhere. Maybe it comes from the above. It's my calling. But then after that, this experience, this trauma, the murder of my husband, and everything I found out and I learned and I educated myself on hospice and the healthcare here. Wouldn't it be so selfish? And I'm talking out and thinking out to myself too, to not because I didn't know about any of those stuff. Wouldn't it be selfish not try to do something so that maybe I can save one disabled person or one elderly person that is in the web of these evil hospice practices today, or in the hospital because their value is nothing because they are either old or they are disabled? If one, then it would be my husband's philosophy, saying, no matter how horrible it is, make something good come out of it, right? So these were the things I was saying during that EMDR session. And then I said, yes, I it's my calling, I guess. And I just feel it. It is my calling. I need to raise awareness on this issue. And I need to be with people like Marsha to so that that started that revelation, or saying it out loud at least, that started um this whole thing. This whole thing, not only today, but my husband, late husband, always wanted me, and he kept saying, when are you going to make the audiobook, right? For classified women. I always get emails from people, he would tell me, because our emails for Newsbud went directly to his email box. And there are people asking about audiobook. And so I decided to start with that, because that was a little step, that little step that didn't put me out in the world. I didn't have to deal with a bunch of human beings, or be exposed to triggers. So I recorded that in March, April this year. And then I surfaced on my Twitter, now X, and I found out that my account had been suspended. My main account, Sibel Edmonds, by Twitter, and it still is out there, not being given back to me by Elon Musk. Now that is X. I don't know. I had 50,000, 60,000 people there. So I started with whatever, some leftover account news, but now YouTube. Let's talk about YouTube. YouTube is not because I'm banned. I have 70,000 of amazing community on my main Newsbud YouTube channel. Why can I use it? Let me explain that. This has nothing to do with anyone banning me. That YouTube channel had the two-step verification system. So one of them was my husband's cell phone number, and the other one was my husband's business account email address, right? Well, after 2 years of the his passing death, um, Ella, can you hear me perfectly fine there? Okay. After 2 years of his death, we canceled that phone number, right? Because I was still like paying for the cell phone and that number. We canceled that business news, but all that has been wrapped up, gone. Those emails are no longer active. So in order to sign in and access my account, because actually I am like the owner of that account, it keeps saying, check your phone for your verification code, check your email, but none of them working. And you say, oh, here's the solution. Go to the website. I have done all that. I have asked for help from people who actually are more savvy than me. You keep ending up with these AIs and these canned AI responses, and it's not going anywhere. After much research, I was told that the only way is to get an attorney, pay that $300 per hour, who knows for how many hours, if and when I have that money, and get an attorney, deal with Google. How crazy is that? But it is what it is because you can get to any human being under any circumstances, even sending it to their corporations or anything. You can't just get anywhere. It's that AI everywhere, right and left. By the way, I don't know. Can they see? This is my emotional support dog. No, I'm kidding. She's been Cozy has been our dog for 8 years. She is our 4 pound. We still call her our puppy. But yeah, she supports me emotionally and she does that magnificently. She's my love. So that's for the YouTube channel. Now, again, um, I'm going to ask Ella, how many people are here live? We have 20 people. Well, that's more than I expected. Okay. Um, what the reason I also cited these topics and that the fact that I'm committed and they are my calling and I'm coming back is I went back and forth on this a lot, and that was sure geopolitical stuff. And I have been in the past 3 months. I am let's say I caught up with everything because I stayed away from all politics and geopolitics for 3 years, 3.5 years. Some political stuff issues because some of this stuff with hospice and hospitals are political. Did you know this? Because can you imagine after all these years of being this woman, keep screaming about George Soros? George Soros, the evil George Soros. As I started delving deeper and deeper on hospice and why in the US this hospice has morphed into this covert forced euthanasia practice, evil, dark place, right? Guess what I found out? In 1997, 1998, George Soros took on hospice as one of his top main projects. And as we know, George Soros also has been one of the main promoters of the euthanasia, right? Go check, go check it out. So it's like, it's like everywhere I go, like all roads lead to Rome. Like even in this particular case, I have to go and hit this evil man, George Soros. So yes, it's political as well because some really dark stuff happening. They have been happening. They have been happening for years in our country. Now, some people call it population control. Some people call it something else, but there are and the other important thing is if you're maybe in your 30s 40s and you think, oh my god, those topics, hospice and that and killing elderly and disabled, I'm strong, I'm young, I will think about it down the road. It's not only about elderly. And first of all, that cancer, Parkinson, ALS, all sorts of other accidents happen to anyone, anywhere. So you can't say, oh, well, that topic is not within my radar. Two, even if it's not in terms of each individual, is do you have a mother or a father or a grandfather that you love, who you love, an uncle or a favorite aunt? I mean, it's something that A will affect all of us personally. Okay. You look at the percentage, more than 70% of people are dying in hospices. So hospice is an important issue. It definitely affects multiple people within our immediate family circles. And yes, it is also very political. So yes, that is part of my calling. So the challenge is this, okay, people, it's like, okay, I have been known all these years to everyone out there who knows about me, okay? Intelligence, covert operations, Operation Gladio, 9/11, civil rights, anti-war movement, geopolitical stuff with Central Asia, and all the stuff with Russia and Iran and all those things. Okay. And because of that, it's like, some people, some actors or actresses, they are getting to be typecasted, right? It's like, no, you can only play in a comedy because that is the stuff that people don't want to see you in anything else. So they have to stick with that same kind of roles for the rest of their lives. Well, they have to. I don't have to. Okay. I don't have to because yet, yes, I'm still very interested in those on those topics. Yes, I have been, especially in the past 2, 3 months, reading up, and I have caught up with the stuff. I basically can pick up and run with it, and I will. That's there. But also, at the same time, I have these things that happen to us, right? As a result of that, I have delve deep into it, and it's one of my causes, and I'm going to pursue that. And I don't want to be in this position of I have to separate it at some point. I do this and I do this site. No, I can't do that either. So I'm in this process of thinking of the best forum ways, methods to widen the lens, widen the scope, because all these things, they are life. The wars that we are inflicting across the pond there, it has implication on us too. It's not only we are killing and murdering and disabling all these people, it's 8,000 miles away, but all the consequences here as well, whether it's on the financial front of it, whether it's our members of military. So it is our lives. It affects our lives. All these things are part of our lives. And yes, everybody, or at least everybody I've seen, or talking about today's media, the alternative media, the social media, via YouTube. You're a YouTuber, you're an Xer, X-Liver, I don't know what they call them, or you're a TikToker. That I'm not going to be. I'm not going anywhere near TikTok. I am so not TikToking. I have never had a TikTok account. I've never seen a single thing on TikTok. Since the day one somebody said there's TikTok, I said, it just sounds ridiculous. I have been completely free of anything TikTok related. So get rid of that. The Instagram, even Facebook, I don't care for Facebook. It leaves the YouTube, it leaves X for some stuff, but also I have to be responsible for my own life here, for my daughter as well. Because of that, Patreon is where I call my community. The place is really, this is a good time to take a pause and say, I really want to thank you, every one of you, my Patreon community members. You made these things possible, okay? I upgraded my cell phone. It was really old. You made it possible. And I got this ring light and I got this. I don't know. There's this microphone. There are two of them. They're working still, hopefully. And these things are made possible because of my supporting community. So Patreon is going to be where the support comes and also where the feedback comes, which I'm longing for. And that is, am I even wanted? Do you want to hear different topics on different topics, sometimes analysis, 9/11 stuff. By the way, I was away with my daughter, and while I was away, and I haven't been giving interviews or any of those stuff, I was asked by an amazing, amazing man, Aaron Good. His site's name on in Patreon is American Exception. He also has X account and YouTube account. Just like a very impressive young man. I'm saying young man because nowadays everybody's younger than me, and he's a young man. But I have been impressed with his work and everything about him, with his style. Not one of these extreme partisan this way, extreme partisan that way. None of those things, right? He has a PhD, and he is, I would say, one of the top experts. It's like it's so good to see. Once upon a time, it used to be people like Paul Craig Roberts, and I'm sure he still is. But you see the younger ones that is not dead with those people, and you see someone like Aaron Good who has so much deep knowledge of all these geopolitical issues that I used to cover, right? The whole someone who truly understands and knows what the notion deep state is, where it started. Someone who doesn't think Operation Gladio is some sort of a conspiracy theory because Operation Gladio historically existed. You can go find the records. Some of them are already public, right? So to get an invitation from someone like that, and someone where I have never had any, I never smelled anything phony, anything like, oh, somebody who's pandering to this side, or someone who's like really straightforward and free of all those gunky stuff. So when someone like that says, "Oh, I saw you, Sibel Edmonds, you just tweeted some stuff having some issue with Tucker Carlson first episode on 9/11 and specifically 8 minutes, and I would like to discuss this, and if time allows, maybe Dennis Hastert and Operation Gladio stuff." And I just said yes because I mean, first of all, it's an honor. I'm so grateful that he asked me, but it's him. I'm my host, the person who's interviewing me, is someone who truly, he's an expert in these areas, right? And he has a very nice style too. None of the gunky, what is the today's entertainment stuff. I respect that. I really like that. So again, I'm grateful he gave me the opportunity to explain why I had such an issue with Tucker Carlson's documentary, the part one, first 8 minutes, and it was like, ha, this is outrageous. I just have to stop it right there. So that interview was initially published for his subscribers at Patreon. He's a fellow Patreon site operator as well. But today he released it open to all. Everybody can comment, but also he posted it on his YouTube channel, which will hopefully bring more attention in terms of the issues. Because I was there again. This is just audio interview that we did, so I wanted to put that one out and saying I really like what his model is nice too, because look, I I don't want to make this a business, put this thing and restrict that thing, make this part of it available to all, make this part of it available there. I first of all, I'm not even in any place that I can even think about that kind of operating future programs. And the other thing is, when I was saying, for example, my daughter was not very ambitious, or I want to get A at the beginning when she was 11, 12, and all this stuff, right? And because of that, she was just happy with what she was doing. Well, same thing with me. I am not having this ambition saying, I want to do things and get 1 million followers. I don't want that, because then probably I would have to somehow, somewhere pander to something. It's very rare without pandering or being kind of a little bit backed by, at least that's in my opinion. Maybe things have changed. I don't know, but I don't have those types of ambitions. I am much more, and I do right now, and I am much more comfortable operating, doing this, working within my community. Community. I mean, that's for me is so important. And it actually proved that it's so important because even during this whole time period when I was gone, there was like this core community members who were out there still supporting me on Patreon. I mean, they are more than friends that I have had in my life, especially in the past 20 years. You have been more than that. And I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful. And I so value you. So I want that to be the headquarters, the center, the epicenter of whatever it is I'm starting or I'm starting to do. I want to do regular videos, and if I'm delving into some topics, it can't be just me live talking about it. For some of those educational, informational stuff, I need to have an editor, a video editor, someone I trust who can also put all the relevant information on the screen for people to see, because some issues, it is for some issues it's much more than opinion. Sure, I can do yakety yakety you and talk about how I feel about this, how I think about that, but if I'm coming and I'm talking to you about the broken healthcare system, or I'm telling you about the hospice murderous covert for all these, or we're talking about the United States government being the biggest drug dealer in the world via its CIA, for those types of claims, I'm going to go back to what I was 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Put your sources out there. Give all these information, like, okay, if you have firsthand information from this particular CIA agent, former agent, or it can be this FBI agent or analyst, or it can be this former Pentagon officials, or if it's this document released under Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, on CIA that delved into Operation Gladio B. So what I'm trying to say is there are those Operation Gladio, what has been taking place in Central Asia, why 9/11, why actually saying that collateral damage of 9/11 is worth it for what we want to do, which has nothing to do with Americans' interests, right? Corporate America, or for all these topics, it has to be more than just sitting and talking. I want to be able to have the information, the links to say, bam, bam, boom, here it is. Now, we can look at that information that is well sourced, that you can say, I'm peddling facts, okay? It's not some made up crap that I heard from someone who said to someone who was on TikTok, then who put it there on the X, and suddenly it became like a fact because four different sources from social media have said it, therefore it must be true. I don't operate, I it's just not, it's not. On the other hand, there are issues that may be dealing with more philosophy and spirituality. For example, this my recovery journey, I just gave you like the tip of the iceberg here, right? I'm far from being fully recovered. But there are tons of things that I want to discuss, I want to talk about. And part of those things are just your own personal philosophy, outlook, how certain lenses can shift and bring in different kind of a view that can have these effects. Those are the types of things that, sure, we can do it. We can do it with lives, and we can do it as a with some guests and have like maybe a group of people discussing, and that's great. That's fine. So there will be multifaceted what I have in mind of coming back. And for this multifaceted coming back, I can't do it just as a hobby once a month. And if I'm going to do it regularly, like I used to do for 20 years, I mean, I did it for 7, 8 years with boiling frog pose, then another 4, 6 years with news, but is I need to have those resources too. It's like how much time can I afford currently to do this? Yes, I do take on some project contract work that I don't have to get out of the house. I can just analyze, I can submit, I rather do this than that because honestly that's boring for me. But that put the bread on the table, right? That let us survive. That let us take care of things. That allowed us stay in this bubble, in this parallel universe for 2.5, 3 years, okay, and not get out and let these scars, some of it at least grow some scab on it. So with that, I would love to hear your take on all that. And this went for so long that I suspect there won't be anyone who's gonna be even tolerating me not taking any questions or anything. So while you're hanging out here, this is the only way I can do that. I know there are some like really fancy studios. People have this machine, they can talk and then they can have people bringing questions. And there's this thing my daughter was telling me about super chat. I don't know about any of those things. All I know is if there are a couple of questions, I would like to take them and I would like to address, at least acknowledge, but I know these chats won't be saved because that's how the live things are. But the comment section, once the recorded live session, this live session, when the recorded session is up there will be comments and it's open to all. You bet I'm going to read every single question. So if I miss some important questions, if you have had questions, please just pose that question again in the comments section once we have the recorded section um, up, which usually takes only, I don't know, half an hour, 1 hour. Well, this is a long live. Okay. Yes. I told you, right? That's the whole thing. When I said, if you know, because there are certain things that we only can really know and understand if we have been touched by it personally. If we have been affected by it personally. Yeah, we can read books, we can even have certain level of sympathy and have that, but we can never really understand. Like as I was saying with PTSD, I was even upset with myself because I told you some of my members were veterans with PTSD. And after listening to how it impacted their lives and the way it impacted their lives, I used to talk about it with my husband and say like, yeah, but all those things we can overcome. I mean, maybe if we accept it too much and say, oh my God, I'm so PTSD, I'm so traumatized, and then we allow it to run us. Because I am telling you, I used to be this type A personality person who thought we could overcome anything and everything, or at least almost everything and anything, just through our sheer willpower. Oh, I was the willpower woman, right? Oh, I could do anything. I would get anything. All it takes is hard work and your God given intelligence. Put it in good use. Be persistent. Be consistent. Go and ace it. That was me. Today's me, looking back after the experiences we went through, looking back, you know, take a note of it, I shake my head and I think how arrogant. I was so darn arrogant. And they say it comes with youth when you're young and you feel like you're tough, there's nothing. And it's not a bad thing necessarily for some things, but to apply it to all things and have that expectation that you are some sort of a superpower, you know, that's just arrogant. But then it becomes like a loop, feedback loop too, because if you do those things, and let's say, let me give an example, my father, right? Then you raise the bar, right? You set this expectations high for, because everyone sees it and they expect that from you, right? Then because you're like that, I'm talking about me, then you're even more under pressure, that you feel like you have to perform because you don't want to let your father down. Not that he's going to go down, but in your mind, you want to always make him proud because you have set the bar high and now you have to perform accordingly. So that takes care of the first 18 years of my life. And then from the age 20 and onward was with my husband, who really put me on the pedestal. But he always was so appreciative of whatever it is that I did or accomplished. Then it would be this thing of saying, I don't want to let him down. Then it would be, I don't want to let my supporters down. I don't want to let my professors down. And I was the first kid too. They say the birth order affects things. So you are constantly, like, always like this, like working and accomplishing and getting things done. And it's like, yes, I want to make sure that I have like the perfect marriage. And then you go make it happen, because it's all about hard work. And guess what? A lot of it was luck. The fact that I met my husband, that had nothing to do with hard work, that part. But that's what I'm saying. With your education, your resume has to be shiny. I am no longer that person. um and it's good and it's bad. It's never one thing, right? It's never only one thing. But one of the things I was diagnosed as part of this whole PTSD condition was, I disassociated myself from myself. And to a certain degree that still continues. Like, I didn't want to have anything to do with Sibel Edmonds, right? Because Sibel Edmonds would not have broken and crumpled. Like, this is not Sibel Edmonds. The stuff that I did in that hospital, all the things that followed, it's just been always viewing it as a third person. It's out of body experience is another way of trying to express it. That and distancing, and I constantly, and I was told that I have constantly distanced myself from Sibel Edmonds. You know, Maybe that was part of the healing that I needed to do that. I don't know. But even right now, I don't think I have reconnected with that Sabal that much. I mean, maybe it's a process. Maybe I will. Maybe it will be more connection. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, because it may sound bizarre to, again, to people who haven't treaded within these paths. But maybe it would have sounded bizarre to me 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't know. But hey, why not? I'm sharing. And with you, I I shared with you 4.5 years ago, sitting here. It was less than 2 months since we had found out about, you know, this was concrete. It was definitive. And I'm sharing with you the collapse, and I'm sharing with you my attempt to come back. And also, thank you for all your support. And also, my Patreon site is listed under this YouTube channel. As soon as I have some fund reserved, I'm going to have this patent attorney nearby who supposedly knows how to deal with Google, get this stuff. That's on my list of things to do, so that we can get that home back, because we have 65,000 of us there. Okay. So that's on the plan. And if you have been listening to this since the beginning, wow, bravo, you're patient. And again, I apologize if I let you down, because I really want to talk about Oregon. Oregon is beyond lawless. I've been seeing these pictures and these slogans about lawless Oregon, and it's beyond lawless, because it's a very shallow way of assessing the situation on the ground with Oregon, because again, you have to always think why, right? Sure, I mean those riots and looting those were like despicable, horrible. But then you're gonna keep going and digging and saying why? Why did it become Oregon this breeding ground? It's a beautiful place. Of all the states I have been to, 43, 42 states, traveled it extensively. There are eight I haven't been to. I want to go, like Michigan, I haven't been to. Iowa, I haven't been to. Oklahoma, I haven't been to. Maine has been on my list. I haven't been to. Alaska. So, yeah, I have been to 42 or 43. But Oregon, by far the most beautiful state I have seen. Beautiful. But how and when and why Oregon became the breeding ground to attract all these gagarellas, right? Gaga. I mean, talking about lunatics. Some of them wealthy lunatics, where I was, Bend, Oregon, all Silicon Valley. And I see that it's now very fashionable. Some of the social media, big following people, they're dealing with issues of satanic and demonic and all those things. Again, 6 years ago, I would have said, pooh, that's ridiculous. Oh my God, that's insane. But honestly, there are some things. Like, why the heck George Soros is doing all this evil stuff, right? It's not for money only. I mean, you can't, what are you going to do when you have billions of dollars, right? So you can't just simplify it and say, oh, yeah, because they want more money. It's money, it's power, which they have, the power they have. They want more than that. But sometimes with some of these things, you don't come up with anything else. And actually, this whole notion of demonic, these evil dark force, right? Darth Vader, right? Evil dark force, demonic forces actually seem very plausible and applicable. It's not that like far fetched thing, I don't believe, because again, applying it to Oregon, it attracted those from Silicon Valley, and my goodness, we were in the midst of it. Again, we love the area, we love the climate, we love the food, the produce, amazing. And they were like, and none of them really from Oregon, because in that part of Oregon, they were these wonderful ranchers, people who've been involved in all sorts of lumber industry, etc. You had all these transplants pouring into Oregon with all gaga in, but in a dark way, gaga. Does that make sense? I know it's like sounds very articulate. Whatever, really gaga rally. That's what I call it. Silicon Valley type, some of like these extremely fried druggy types, and then the violent types, but they all being like attracted to Oregon. What created that breeding ground atmosphere, right? You have this mosquito issues behind your house that is this like a sewage field pond or little creek or whatever it is, like it's not a moving water, and it's creating so much bugs and mosquitoes, right? And I'm talking about Trump sending the people to round up people and all those stuff, National Guard. I mean, needed, but that is not going to solve the problem, because if that pond is creating that and you don't address the pond, right? And you keep bringing these little airplanes every 2 months to just spray. Okay, we killed like billions of larvae for the mosquitoes. This is going to give you a relief, but that's going to give you a relief for 2, 3 weeks. There they come back again. Then it becomes more. Then it becomes more. Then you send a plane. You kind of at some point you want to say, okay, maybe we need to just drain that swamp, right? Treat that, because that is the breeding ground. With Oregon, it should, the approach for this type of situation, especially with Oregon, should be that. And for that, I need to have an episode to explain to you what happened with Oregon. They took away our house, our homestead, and they took all our furnitures. Okay, and you won't believe how crazy it is. You won't believe how crazy it is when the courts and the Oregon, the government, you would say, how can that be? And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I've already found a few people with similar situations, and there is nothing you can do. It is so lawless. There's like nothing works. None of the laws of the land applies there. The government itself there in Oregon has been taken over by these elements. So Donald Trump sending the troops, arresting some illegal immigrants, taking them out, and some of these criminals were like looting and breaking the, store windows, torching cars and everything. Okay, so you do that, but the reason those people have been able to do this and carry out is because the governing body is infested by some demonic forces, okay? Illegal, criminal demonic forces that have been defying actually the United States Congress. Okay, they did that. They took all our sources funding. We were starving for the last 2 months. Okay, let me put it that way, because we had only my husband's social security, right, that he was getting, and he was part of the high bracket. But we had just moved to Florida with 2 suitcases. We were renting, and the rent because of COVID had been like $3,500, the cheapest place you could rent in Naples, Florida, and in the middle of COVID, right? And our funds were like taken away, all our retirement, everything. You know why? Because of this. I will tell you the Oregon story. That's for another episode. But what I'm saying is there are so many things to delve into. And I don't know how many people would want to even watch a 2 hour thing. I've been away for so long. It's been 4 years, 4.5 years. So why not? I just wanted to pour it out, put it out here, saying this was the situation. This is what it is. It's always been this is what it is. I never operated with teleprompters and rehearsed stuff. It's always been heart to heart. And those core communities that we've had, I appreciated them. They appreciated this because I can't be any other way, right? I just can't be. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't even be able to maintain it for 5 minutes. I would have never looked for any jobs in diplomacy department, I am, I'm very blunt. I am who I am. I say it as I see it, right? And you don't get anything. You don't have to seconds like, oh, really? Is true? No, it's me you're getting. And with that, thank you, every single one of you who patiently remained here online with me live. I really want to thank you. And I know I have missed your questions, and I'm promising you here on the record, you put any of the questions that I can answer, not like a paragraph answer, what do you think of 9/11? Please listen to my interview with Aaron Good. I explained all the stuff with the point I made on Tucker Carlson's documentaries, the first 8 minutes. That answers that question. But if you have any other types of questions, please put it in the comment section after the recorded session goes up. Patreon.com is my community. Okay, please join me. I don't have Newsbud anymore. I don't have any other websites or community that I'm doing podcasts with. Patreon.com, and it's under Sibel Edmonds /Sibel Edmonds. You put my name. And what I'm hoping is, I hope that I can have everything open to all, right? So we don't have to worry about, oh, this is for the members. I don't want to do that. Please, let's not do that. But in order to do that, I want to count on you to, times are bad. Inflation is terrible. Those of you who can, those of you who are able, those of you who want this to be out, sessions and podcasts, etc., and open to all, you do your part as much as you can through that Patreon. There's like monthly subscription, and it's something like $4, $5, anything you can. Some people have done $10, but so that this can be open to all. We don't have to worry about any of those things. And then maybe together we figure out and kind of more clarify this path that I was talking about. We will have maybe once a week live session, and no, I will hopefully have like the breaks and look at the questions. Then we will have educational, more informational podcast / video with editing with the sources there. And then maybe having some kind of a discussion sessions, interview sessions, because there are some amazing people out there. Okay. And I just love that dialogue, to be able to present an interview or a discussion between three people on whether it's the hospice, whether it's 9/11, whether it's Kyrgyzstan, whether it's the heroin, for all these kinds of things. I'm going to need your support and help. And also, I need your help to help us create this path, whatever path is going to be, to have this revival, to take this and use it as a momentum to have the revival. Have a wonderful rest of Sunday evening, and please stay in touch and put your comments in there, and I'll be with you. We'll connect again soon. Thank you.